Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, home of these aggressive tiger bass. And their love for chasing these shiners around the pond is starting to show as we broke the record and caught the biggest bass out of the 5-acre pond this week. And unfortunately, when you have big bass in a pond like this, people are going to show up to try to catch them, as we had our first trespasser at the pond earlier this week. And I kind of always knew that it was only a matter of time, because we've shown this complete pond build from start to finish, and we know that there's a lot of people out there that would like to come fish it. But I will have to say, out of all the ponds that you could trespass in, this is probably the worst one, because this is basically the Fort Knox of ponds when it comes to surveillance, as we have dozens of cameras that cover every possible angle of the pond. And when we installed these cameras, it wasn't to watch out for trespassers, but it was meant for filming the pond build process and all the fish and wildlife that live out here on the farm. But not only do we have the dome style cameras that record 24/7, we also have several motion activated cameras set up around the pond that send us a text message every time something moves in front of it. So we pretty much know exactly when someone shows up to fish the pond. And not only that, we recently installed some underwater cameras, so we can even see the exact lure that you were fishing with in the pond. So now let's see exactly how this trespassing event unfolded. So this guy showed up in the area of the pond that we call Bonnie's Bayou and triggered one of the motion activated cameras right there in the corner of the pond. And this particular camera also has audio, and you can see he's throwing a topwater lure, and if you listen closely it sounds like a buzzbait. And this guy showed up right after dark, and you can kind of see what's left of the sunset going down there in the background. But it took a couple of minutes for me to check those notifications and see that we had activity there in Bonnie's Bayou. And so at this point I got on our dome cameras and got zoomed in a little bit so we could see exactly what was going on. And keep in mind that for the trespasser as well as all the wildlife out here, everything is pitch black dark. And as you see me point these dome cameras at him, it almost looks like a spotlight's on him, but that's only because the cameras can detect the infrared light and human eyes can't see it. So as he continues fishing around the pond, you'll see that infrared spotlight tracking him as he moves along, and that's basically me tracking him with the cameras. But again, he has no idea that it's even happening. And the beauty of these dome cameras is that you can zoom in, but unfortunately at night you can't zoom in enough to get an actual facial profile. But if I had to take a guess, to me it looks like a kid, maybe in his late teens or early 20s. But my biggest concern at the moment is that white bucket, because I can only see a few different possibilities of why he would carry that around the pond. The first and least likely reason is using it as a seat. The second is that he could be carrying around some fishing lures and kind of using it as a bait bucket. Or the third option, and the one I really hope he didn't bring it for, is using it as a fish bucket to catch some of these bass and remove them out of the pond. But I have to take a minute and talk about what it means to be a trespasser, because some trespassers are pretty harmless and others not so much. So when I was a kid, my desire for fishing outweighed the spots that I had to fish. And I'll be the first one to admit that when I was a teenager, I snuck into a pond or two, but it was always catch and release. But now there are some trespassers that sneak into a pond, catch the fish, and keep them, which I feel like is a whole different category of trespassing. Because you all have seen all the hard work that was put into building the pond, stocking these bass when they were little 2-inch fry, and then feeding them for 3 years takes a lot of effort. Anyone that watches this series knows that I put a pit tag in every bass, and we've actually named most of the fish in this pond. And so if this guy's sneaking into the pond to remove some of these fish that we've worked so hard for, to me that's a different level of trespassing. But luckily so far, I don't think he's caught anything. And this part's pretty funny. He even works his way over to what we call the peanut picnic table, but it looks like he turned his light on and pulled something out of that bucket. So maybe he is just using it as a bait bucket. And I'm guessing he spends a little time right here retying some lures. And again, there's no lights out at the farm, so it's pitch black dark, and he has no idea that he's being watched. So at this point, the guy had been fishing for about 45 minutes, and I've got a friend that's a police officer that lives nearby, and I gave him a call just to hear his thoughts. And he said in these scenarios, he wouldn't be so worried about someone trespassing or the fishing aspect of it. But if something was to happen to this guy and he was to get injured on our property, that could open up a whole different set of problems. And he was off duty at the moment, but he said he'd ride over, see if the guy was still there, and talk to him. And he's actually on the corner of the pond that's closest to the road that comes in. And this is where things are going to get interesting. So he's about to see headlights from the cop's vehicle as he drives down that long road that leads to the pond. And keep in mind, he doesn't know that we've been watching him. So as soon as he sees those headlights, he goes into the full prone position. And he's probably thinking he may still go undetected. But when the vehicle starts driving directly up to him, I think at this point he realizes he's about to get caught and makes a run for it. But the first thing that I noticed is that he left his rod and bucket, and then I watched it back again. As he's running, he either throws something or loses some baits along the way. And watch this, guys. As he's running down the pond dam, it looks like he turns around to take a look back and trips himself and almost does a complete front flip. You can even see the reflectors on his shoes in the air. Let's watch it from one more camera angle that'll give you a full picture of what happened. Alright, he sees the lights, knows he's busted at this point, abandons whatever's in that bag that gets tossed up into the air, running full speed down the dam, and boom, down he goes. Got him. But here's something you're not going to believe. One of my deer cameras also captured him running through the field, and that's about 300 yards away that he's still sprinting, so this young man has some endurance. Alright, now let's head over here and see what was left behind. So this is where he was last spotted, right here at the peanut picnic table. And here's the mystery bucket that we were wondering what it was used for. Looks like he was using a black buzzbait, and he even completely abandoned his rod and reel and even left the lure in the water. Probably didn't have time to reel that in, but it looks like a pretty nice setup. And here's what he was fishing with last. That's the bait he swapped over to, a worm. But now I want to see what the mystery items were that got flung up into the air as he was running down this dam. Okay, it looks like it was a tackle bag. Got some fishing lures, pack of worms, some hooks, another buzz bait. Oh, it looks like we've got a scale here. So he had intentions on catching some big ones. And this is that black bag I saw go up into the air. That must have been his lure bag. Yep, that's exactly what that was, as he had another black scum frog in there. Well, there you have it, folks. The first trespasser out here at the Crimson Oak Farm. And just like everything else, we're going to have to give him a name. My vote is Forrest Gump because he had some endurance. No, but with all jokes aside, I'm happy it ended like that and without any controversy. To me, it was a pretty harmless evening by the guy. One of the reasons I built this pond is to bring some of our subscribers out here and let some of you guys fish it, especially the ones that followed the entire journey. And this guy showed me that there's obviously people that want to fish it bad enough that they'll sneak in here. So we're going to try to start bringing a lot more of you guys out here starting with this video. All you have to do is leave a comment down below on what you think we should name the trespasser, and I'm going to select one of those names in the next video and invite you guys out here for a fishing trip. And now that these fish are pretty much grown, fishing out here is a lot of fun, and we'll try to get as many of you out here as we possibly can. And if you missed our last video, we added 12,000 adult golden shiners to the pond, and folks, I've never seen this pond stocked with so much bait. The fish are all shallow right now, so as you look down the pond's edge, there's a dark wave that is full of thousands of bait fish, those shiners that we just added, as well as a bunch of threadfin shad. So now one of my favorite things to do is walk down the edge of the pond, because those shiners like to stay right up there in that shallow grass, and as I walk by it spooks them off the bank, and that's when we get to see some of those topwater explosions. And I'll have to admit, I wasn't expecting this one. It surprised me a little. But man, these tiger bass are aggressive, and there's nothing they love more than that adult golden shiner. This is basically their Thanksgiving holiday, as they have an all-you-can-eat buffet, and is also what we call bulking season for them. And if you watch some of these clips, you'll see that the bass actually work together and school up and push the shiners into a pinch point, and that's when they attack and get the easy meal. And also, like I mentioned in the last video, the shiners and threadfins are their preferred food of choice, because even though we have just as many bluegill and tilapia in the pond at this time, as we've watched these bass over the years, they always prefer these shiners because they don't have those dorsal fins on the top of their spine, like a bluegill does, which makes it harder for them to digest. But here's something else I was really happy to see. We've also got some big populations of threadfin shad, and for some reason they're all up shallow, probably with this warm weather they're thinking about spawning again. But this younger group was hatched in this pond most likely after the May or June shad spawn, and as I walked around the pond I saw several big schools of them, and one of the main reasons that it's important to have multiple food sources is because it gives each bait fish time slots where they're not being targeted. So if these threadfins were the only bait in this pond, the bass would hit them all at once and knock them out. But right now, since all their focus is on those golden shiners, it's giving these young threadfins plenty of time to grow up and become adults. Alright, let's head over to the 300-gallon aquarium and check in on the jumbo freshwater prawns. And as you would expect, whenever you put 4 big males in an aquarium, they're going to spend a little bit of time fighting, because there's not a lot of places for them to hide in here. So today we're going to do something to fix that. I'm going to be using my Bamboo Lab 3D printer to build them an underwater cave and hideout. So we just finished up the printing and pieced everything together, and here's a quick overview of the cave. It's got an entrance and an exit, as well as what I call the basement and the place they're going to be hiding out. And this area is actually going to be touching the glass, so even when they go down in the cave, we'll still be able to see them. Alright, so to get this set up, we had to move the big boys out of the aquarium into some 5-gallon buckets. And the goal is to put the cave right there where the big rock is. So we're going to move it out of the way, and then slide the substrate to the left and to the right of that area. Insert the cave and then backfill it with rocks to make it level. Alright, so as soon as I got it in the aquarium, I had a couple other ideas. So the original plan was to have the open face of the cave touching the glass, so it would still be closed off, but we could see them. And then I was going to add more substrate and build a mound so that the entrance and exit holes were level, which would basically make it like a basement beneath the gravel. But after seeing this in the aquarium, I thought that I built the holes on the top large enough, but looking at these prawns, they do have some really big pinchers that also stick out a good bit wider than their body, so they may or may not feel comfortable going in and out of those holes. So the other option would be to build a few of these and put them over in the corners of the aquarium so they could easily walk in and out of them and have plenty of room to turn around. So I'm kind of torn. Before I go to adding all the substrate in the aquarium, I'd like to hear what you guys think. Should we build it as a cave or a basement beneath the substrate, or on the sides of the aquarium for easy access? Let me know what you think in a comment down below. But here's another 3D print that I'm pretty excited about, and that's an automatic pellet feeder for the prawns. So as you can see, it's got a little hopper there on the top that the pellets go into, and then on the back, a small circuit board that's going to actuate that circular motor. So as I drop the pellets in the top, once a day it'll spin around and dump them down into the aquarium. Alright, I just got power on it to give you guys a demonstration. We set the timer to dump every 30 seconds, and you can see it spins around and the pellets that are held in that chamber dump down into the aquarium. And since things weren't exactly level, I've got to build a little prop for it, but let's test out its functionality with just a couple of pellets. And there we go, works like a charm. Alright, while we're at it, I gotta show you a few more tools that I printed that we'll be using in today's video. Check this out, you can even print a little bait fish trap, also known as a crawfish trap. The crawfish or the bait swims in this small hole where you put some kind of bait or attractant in the center here, and then once they enter the cone, they're trapped and most of them can't get back out. So we're going to be testing this out, and we even printed some buckets so I could haul some shiners from the 5-acre pond to feed Truman in the wetland filter, and we even got a miniature bucket for Oliver. Alright, I loaded it up with some bread, which should be all it takes to catch a few shiners. At first I was a little concerned that it wasn't going to sink, but it just took it a second. We'll be back to check on the trap here in a little while. But if you guys aren't that familiar with 3D printers, the beauty is that if you live in a remote location like this farm, and you need some tools or parts, rather than buying them online or driving to a store, you can just print what you need. For instance, I've even been printing some fishing lures, like this hollow body topwater frog, so it's going to need a little paint job, but I can guarantee you that'll catch a fish. But Bamboo Lab is also compatible with Maker World, and that's where I found all of these models, and that makes it nice because beginners can even use this printer without having to learn how to model. And my printer is the X1C, and even though it's one of Bamboo Lab's older models, it's been very reliable. And since then, they've came out with newer models with even better features that I'd recommend checking out. So if you're intrigued by 3D printing, now's the perfect time to buy one, because Bamboo Lab is having their Black Friday sale for a limited time. So do me a favor and click that link in the video description and go check them out, and leave us a comment down below on what you'd like to see us print next. Alright, we're out here on the dock as the sun's going down, and as you can see, we got a few of the bass and even tilapia sitting right here at the surface because they know it's feeding time. And I find it funny because I have about a dozen of these bass that are almost like the bass over in Cedar Falls, and are pretty much pets because every time I come out to the dock, they swim up looking for that easy meal. And even though this pond has tens of thousands of bait fish in it right now, these little guys prefer that easy meal. And if you guys recall in the last video, one of our bigger bass named Ghost showed up for the feeding, and we could tell she had gotten really big since the last time we caught her. We were guessing somewhere in that 7 to 9 pound range. But this afternoon we had not only one big bass show up, but another even bigger bass showed up to join in on the feeding. And the wild thing about it is, this mystery bass is noticeably bigger than Ghost. You'll notice 2 bass come up at the same time, and the one on the top I'm guessing is roughly 4 pounds. And the one on the bottom I'd say is twice that big, so potentially an 8 pounder. But the really cool part about this feeding is that both of the big fish would come up and eat at the same time. That's how I could confirm that it wasn't just Ghost that I was seeing, because there's a few clips where they come up together, and you can also tell that this big bass has some power. Whenever it commits to a shiner, it's going to leave some waves behind. And as you'll see later here in this video, we catch the record bass out of this pond, and I'm not sure if it was one of these 2 fish or not, but it's really nice seeing that we have multiple fish that are over 6 pounds. Because when we built this pond, one of the biggest goals we had was growing a 10-pound bass. And anytime you have a pond like this with multiple fish in it that could reach that potential, obviously your odds of growing that 10-pounder go way up. And some of these fish have even been growing over 2 pounds a year, which would mean that there's a good probability that 2026 is the year that we finally reach that 10-pound mark. But there's one thing that's for sure, feeding them these shiners off the dock is only going to help them get there. Alright, now let's head over to the 20,000 gallon pond that we call Cedar Falls, and I captured something really unique this week as I got an underwater shot of a snake swimming in the pond. So we have a water snake that lives here that we call Jake the Snake, and it could be him, but I can't say for certain. But there is one thing for sure, and that's that we have grown some thick boys in this pond. They also get a heavy dose of shiners all year long, and some of these bass were even born right here in this pond. There's a good look at Spot, the spotted bass, swimming by. And we also have the big black crappie that we call Outlaw that got transferred over here from the backyard pond. And there's a good one. We got the whole gang in this shot, even the tilapia back there in the background. They always school up when it gets close to feeding time. There's a good shot of those tilapia, just as white as could be. I have no idea how they survive with the bald eagles living here. And hey, there's Smalley the smallmouth bass, followed up by one of the big bluegills that we also transported from the backyard pond. Good to see him out and about. But we hadn't had a lot of rain recently, so the pond water's nice and clear. I could watch this underwater footage for days. You learn so much by watching what goes on beneath the water surface. And look what else we're starting to see here in the shallow parts of the pond. We got some prawn shells. And this is actually where a prawn molted, and they're pretty much fully grown this time of year. And if you missed the last video, Moby was snacking on one of them. But as I mentioned, with this warmer weather, these fish have huge appetites. And if any shiners survive during feeding time, they usually school up right here beneath the waterfall. And when I walk nearby, it's just like it is over at the 5-acre pond. They run from me, not knowing they're running directly into a trap. But with the amount of bass that we have in this pond right now, it's amazing that any of them survived. Especially at night, whenever those night lights come on, and I think that's when most of them get wiped out. Alright, we got a foggy morning here at the pond. You almost can't see to the other side of it. And the bass are starting right where they left off, eating breakfast this morning. But we did have our first cold front and frost move through this past week, and I always like it because it does seem like the wildlife are more active during the daytime. As you can see, the deer and herons are out feeding this morning. But I had a really interesting clip that I had to show you guys. If you notice, Peter Cottontail's down in the bottom left-hand corner of the frame, just hopping along, and then he stands up on his back feet as he senses danger. And for a good reason, because we have a fox entering from the right side of the screen. And it looks like the fox is a little crouched down, kind of in that hunting pose, cruising through the farm, hunting his next meal. And I have to point out one more time that these are infrared lights. So for both of these animals, it's pitch black dark outside. And it's funny because the young fox slips probably within 20 yards of the rabbit, but I don't think he's got any clue that he's there. But if you notice, the rabbit almost becomes a complete statue and sits as still as he possibly can, trying to avoid detection. And then now time for the plot twist. The rabbit didn't realize that the fox was going to lay down and basically just take a long rest in the middle of his hunt. So at this point, it's got to be torture because the rabbit has to hold that statue pose with the fox laying so close to him. But he's doing a good job, hadn't moved a bit, and eventually the fox starts looking around, thinking it's time to go back on a hunt again. He kind of looks like a baby fox that hadn't completely honed in his hunting skills, but now he's crouched back down and continues the hunt. And by staying still, Peter Cottontail survived another night. But Peter must enjoy hanging out in this area because he's been out here a lot lately. You'll even see him hopping around out here in the field when George Jones and his lady friend shows up. But he's also back there on the very edge of the pond if you notice his little bright eyes. And then we've got a lot of deer showing up. We've got a few bucks and does interacting here. A little bit of chasing going on. And we even have some deer walk right up to Peter. So we got those herons and big white birds chasing bait around until the boss man decides to show up. And that's Mr. Bald Eagle. So he flies down and runs them off. And whenever one of the white birds comes back, he said, "Not today. Those are my shiners." So they're pretty territorial, not happy with other birds eating their fish. So we got one bald eagle hanging out there on the stump, and the other one decides to show up. And it's rare that we get to see both of them out here feeding at the same time, but it's most likely because they're not on any nesting duties yet. And here's something else I found really interesting. I'm guessing that the eagle that was on the stump was the female, and as she flies over to the male, this is what you guys have said is their mating ritual. Because we had the same thing happen with ospreys out here at the farm. And I thought that they may be fighting, but several of you guys said that they were making baby ospreys. And I think you guys are right, so hopefully we'll be seeing some baby eagles here soon. But birds aren't the only thing we have a lot of out here this time of year. Man, look at the deer. We planted a 5-seed mix of winter crops in this entire field a little over a month ago, and I think you can officially call this a herd now. That's probably as many deer in one shot that I've ever seen out here. We even have some of them coming up to the feeder to eat those protein mixes. But like always, we're happy to see the wildlife enjoying the farm. Alright, right here after sunset, we got the moon out, and we're headed over to the dock where we got the underwater green lights turned on. And that light draws those bait fish in, which means those bass are going to be right behind them. And some of you may have noticed that you hadn't seen any of these underwater green light clips in our videos for quite a while now, and I turned them off for a couple reasons. The first reason is that threadfin shad aren't very smart, and some nights I'd walk out on the dock, and I think I'd see every threadfin shad in the pond swimming in a circle around the green light, and the bass just picking them off one by one. And if you guys recall, before we ever stocked the bass in the pond, we stocked bluegill and threadfin shad, and had an overabundance of shad in the pond when we first put the bass in. And then I noticed after the second year, we were having trouble keeping those threadfin shad populations up. And my guess is that it was one of two things. The first one is that they were all just attracted to these underwater green lights, and the bass ate them much faster than they should have. And the second theory is that the rainbow trout wiped them out, because I didn't realize how big of a predator those trout were, but I got to see it firsthand and watch several trout leap into the air chasing the threadfins out of the water. And it could have been a combination of both, but once I turned the green lights off and the trout are no longer in the pond, I've definitely noticed an increase in our threadfin populations. But the other downside that I saw that happened when the green lights were on every night is that once the baitfish populations dwindled and the bait wasn't showing up to the lights at night, the bass would still come out of habit, and bass are pretty territorial. They'll school up some during feeding times, but the rest of the time they want to stake out a claim in a certain area of the pond near a piece of structure or rock or something like that, and have that spot as their own. Well, what I saw happening is that when you get too many bass in a small area by the green lights, if there's not enough food for them to chase around, then they basically start chasing each other off, trying to claim that area. And so for hours throughout every night, these bass would be exerting a lot of energy trying to claim a spot and not getting anything in return for it. So at that point, I cut all the green lights off, worked on getting our threadfin populations back healthy, and I think we're back at a good spot. So I think the best thing to do is just turn these green lights on periodically, just enough for them to swim by and get a snack every so often, but not enough to try to stake a claim on the area. And also not enough to wipe out our threadfins again. And hey, look at there, we even had Mr. Turtle show up. So in our last video, I mentioned that the adult golden shiners would even eat some of these protein pellets that come out of the feeders. And also a reason that they can get big really quick, especially when compared to a threadfin. So a threadfin feeds primarily on the plankton that comes from the algae bloom, and the golden shiners will feed on that as well, but they're not picky and will also eat a lot of other food sources. So they grow at a much quicker rate. But you guys can easily see that white tilapia that's been feeding. But how many of you noticed that there's another type of fish up there feeding on those pellets? And that's one of those tiger bass. Just when you think you figured a fish out, they always throw you a curveball. So I'll never be able to explain how this bass has an abundance of his favorite food source, the golden shiner, right in front of him, but instead of eating them, he prefers the protein pellets. You never know what you're going to see out here with these fish. But now I want to show you an overhead clip during one of these feedings. And here recently it's been about a 50-50 split where the bluegills eat half of it and the tilapia eat the other half. But I'm always watching out for one of those big 6 or 7 pound largemouth coming up chasing the bluegill. And we got lucky and captured a pretty cool shot. Look right there where you saw that big splash, and when I slow it down, you'll see that a bass narrowly misses a large bluegill. But that big splash kind of reminds me of that big bass we were seeing feeding off the dock earlier. And that's how these bigger bass have gotten so big, and that's occasionally eating a big bluegill or tilapia. So I got a notification from one of my swamp cameras and couldn't believe it when I got on and saw a buck rubbing my camera post. Of all the trees in the woods, he had to rub on my camera. But he completely messed up the view as it was pointing right down at the ground, and I thought, well, we're not going to see anything on that camera until I go fix it. But I was surprised when first Chip showed up. There's a good look at some deer hooves. And hey, look at there, we even got a jumbo armadillo. Maybe the buck did me a favor and this isn't a bad camera angle after all. But once I got it back upright, we got to see some armadillos chasing each other through the woods. And here at first I only noticed Mr. George Jones the possum, but look on the tree in the background, and it's the owl that we call Hooter. Good seeing him. And here we got Mr. Buck Deer about to cross the creek. And another Mr. Buck Deer following directly in his footsteps. They travel together a lot this time of year. And I don't know what the armadillos are eating down here in the swamp, but there must be an abundance of it because they've gotten big. And another buck deer crossing the creek at night. So now let's see what else we see on the Bonnie Bayou cam now that the Trespasser's gone. We got a nice sunset with the doe coming down to take a sip of pond water, more bird activity, and them chasing those golden shiners. And Mr. Longneck the blue heron also snagging him a few. Here we got a young deer on the left, and a fish moved out of the pocket on the right. I think the deer was thinking about crossing, but when he saw the fish, he said, nah, I'm not so sure about that. Mr. Blue Heron with a nice sunset. And maybe some of you can help me identify this bird. It just showed up at the pond. Got a long beak. Sounds similar to a seagull. And there's one of my favorite shots. The sun's going down. Bass are busting. Life is good. Alright, the fish feeders just went off out there, but we're about to do a little fishing and see how big these bass have gotten. They should be putting on some weight with all these golden shiners we added. But every fish we catch, we inject a pit tag so we can track their weight and see how big they're getting each time we catch them. And we use this pit tag scanner, which will give us a unique code for each fish, and we'll track it in our database. But since we've had so much surface activity, we're going to see if we can catch them on a topwater frog today. If not, a swim bait combo should work. Whoa. Got a good one. Oh, what we got here? What's a big one? Oh, look at that. Man, this fish is fighting. Come on in here. Yes, sir. Look at that, folks. Oh my goodness. We might have caught ghost. What a giant bass. My goodness. That's definitely the biggest bass I've caught out of this pond. That is a giant. Alright, this fish is 6'9", 701. Weighing in at 7.29 pounds. Man, what an incredible fish. Alright, this fish is named Junebug and now owns the record for the largest bass in this pond. So we've only seen Junebug 2 other times. Once we caught it back in January of 24, and the interesting thing is that 1 year later, it doubled its weight back when we caught her during the electrofishing survey. And for a bass to grow 3 pounds in a year is an incredible feat that you just rarely see. But this is also the first fish to break that 7-pound mark. And hey, if it grew another 3 pounds in a year, then by this time next year, Junebug could be our first 10-pounder. There we go. Look at all the bass back down the bank hitting too. Got one to commit to the frog. There's a frog eater. Alright, this fish has been caught before. 33008, weighing in at 1.78 pounds. Alright, this fish is named 10-Pound Tony, and he's going to need to eat a lot more to get to that 10-pound weight. But I opened up a few more spots on our pit tag database with those letters U through Z. So if you want to join in and name one of these tiger bass, leave a comment down below with names that start from U through Z. Got him. He's running out to deep water. He's running right at me. Don't get in that tree. Got them thick stuff. There we go. That's a nice one. Alright, this fish has been caught, 6'9", 709, weighing in at 2.66 pounds. Alright, this fish is named Elon, and we caught it a few times in the past, and it's gained about a half a pound since we caught it in the spring. Got him. Oh yeah. Right up on the bank. Old thick one. Alright, this fish has been caught, 32729, and it weighs 1.87 pounds. Well, that fish hit it when it hit the water. Got him. Little guy. He was sitting right there waiting on it though. Little guy, probably hadn't been tagged before. This fish has not been tagged, so we'll add a tag. Alright, this fish's tag is going to be 33156, weighing in at 1.54 pounds. Alright folks, if you made it this far in the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button to follow along with all the ponds and wildlife out here at the farm. But I hope y'all enjoyed this one, and we will see you all next time.